Hey guys, it's your boy Pat. Welcome back to the next episode of the Hollow Down Cigar Lounge. We got a fun show for you guys today. Another show that is not a review show. So we're going to bring in everybody that we're going to hang out with. Got Mr. Chad up here that y'all used to seeing.
How's
Our
everybody doing?
first time guest down here, we got Ian Reith, owner, founder of Dapper Cigars. How are you doing, my man?
Very good. How are you guys doing?
We
Fantastic.
are killing it. Um, so Chad's up in the Northeast. I'm down true South. Completely different weather, but luckily we've both gotten out of it. So we're just hanging out, having some good times today, smoking, talking, shooting shit.
I like
So
it.
since this is not a review show, we're all smoking whatever the hell we want to smoke. I think me and Chad are both throwing homage to Dapper today, because there's no better reason to do that.
Oh, nice. We got a little
For sure.
Siempre Rosado and a little Baracho broadleaf.
Yep.
Man, that's it.
El
I think
Baracho's my jam.
I think I sent you some of our new release, right? I can't remember. I hope I did. Jeez. Hopefully it went out this week.
Oh, I
I
don't
can't
know.
remember.
I
Well,
know.
if not, we'll hook up after the show and then get me a good mailing address. I think we
Yeah,
talked
I
on
think we just.
Instagram.
I think there was just conversations, but I don't think we actually ever did anything because we were just talking about some things.
Okay.
Well,
All
well,
right.
what is
Well,
what is the new release? Because that's a great segue.
That is.
yeah. Well, we just got these in. So this is our 10th anniversary.
Oh,
There's our
beautiful.
camera right there. Yeah, it's a really cool matte box, and each one of them is limited. And I didn't mark which. I didn't mark box number one. Well, it's not my fault; it's factory's fault. So it looks like I got box 675.
Okay.
So we made it. We made it 1,000 boxes of these, and yeah, these just came out, and we're going to do a press release here in the next day or so.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so that's what I'm going to try to smoke, and I'll get you guys some. I'll get you guys some of those in the mail.
Heck yeah.
So you
And
Yeah,
try
we'd
'em.
love to. We'll do a review on one. That'd be
I was just
awesome.
about to say,
Yeah.
yeah. And if you want, now this is a very new endeavor for us, so we just started a mail blog not too long ago. But if you want to send me that press release, I'll throw it out to our small group as well.
Yeah, yeah, we'll hook up and get all that information from you, um, and get you some cigars out.
So
So
the
all of your
we
retailers will carry that then, Ian,
Well, I don't know. I
or
wish
will
they
it be
would.
exclusive to certain ones?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So initially, because it's limited, we're going to set some criteria, and basically the criteria is that if you're an active account, and, by active account means you've ordered within the last year.
Okay.
So they'll have first dibs at the cigars, and then after we get all those taken care of, then we'll announce it for kind of general release to every any other retailers that may want it. But
that's fair.
most of the retailers, yeah, we got to give them first stab at it. And
Yeah,
most of the retailers that are active, they'll probably carry it. I mean, I wish I could spend their money for them, but I can't.
Right.
right, right.
And
You'd be
it's
you'd
the
be sold out.
PCA too. It's
Yeah.
the PCA. So, the PCA is coming up here real shortly. So I know people don't have unlimited funds, obviously. So,
Yeah, you've got
the
so many
more buff.
dollars, you got to spread them so far, right? That's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll probably see you at PCA, Ian. So,
I, I will not be there this year. So we're not doing any trade
oh,
shows this year. Which is a shame because I really wanted to go to New Orleans. I like New Orleans a lot better than Las Vegas. And it's been at Las Vegas for so many years, but
Right.
right.
we're going to skip this year, and then hopefully next year we'll be there. We'll see how it goes. We're focused a little bit more on our internal sales, uh, director of retailers. Get out there. We still got a lot of parts of the country that we haven't really that I haven't personally gone out to. I haven't visited the retailers in person, uh, and I think we've gone to like 7 or 8. I don't know how many PCAs we've done, but we've done quite a bit of them, minus the one year that COVID was going on. We did do the very first one after they skipped one, I think it was. But did they skip one? I can't even remember if we skipped one. I think we skipped one. That year was a blur. But
I
yeah,
think it's good.
yeah,
Yep.
I think we skipped one of them, and then the next one maybe um, we went to, and that was the one that a lot of folks didn't go to because there was still a lot of concerns about that stuff and whatnot. And but yeah, we've been going to it for a while, and um, I think we've kind of gotten the most out of what we can for that. And we obviously see the same retailers over and over again through the years, and that's a good part about connecting with them and whatnot. But I think a lot of our focus this year needs to be getting out to parts of the country uh, that we haven't seen yet. And I get a lot of it's really good for me to get out there and actually visit the stores. And it's one thing to see somebody at the show every year, but then you really have no idea, about their shop. They can sit there and tell you about it for like
Mhm.
2 or 3 minutes, but it
Right.
helps when I can go out there and actually experience the shop and see, meet the people that are working there, meet the customer base, and and relate with the shop more than currently if I've never seen the shop before. And so
Right.
yeah, that's what we want to focus on this year. So hopefully we can get out to some more territories and I can see a lot more shops and visit a lot of folks that I've seen over the years at the PCA, but I've never actually walked in their store. I think it'd be nice.
Gives you a
Spending,
good personal connection to it.
yeah, spend more
100%.
time and money on the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
100%.
you're on the West Coast, right? You're out in California,
Yeah, I'm in Central California, so we're right in the smack dab of everything in Fresno.
and you
So
have a ton of retailers out there, right? Because I think I was
we
looking
have
on
all
your
the retailers out here. Yeah,
right, right.
we guilt them into it. No, most of our business, because we started on the West Coast, is on the West Coast, and we have a lot of California retailers, which is tough for a lot of companies don't do any business in California, but because we're based out of here and there's some tax advantages and whatnot, we're better here than we are in a lot of areas of the country. But we do have a lot of areas of the country that we do pretty well, and we do pretty well in New England now, and um, Texas is kind of picking up, and Ohio's
Mhm.
pretty good. And so there's other parts of the country um, that we're growing and doing better in. But obviously, I need to spend a little bit more time on the road and get to see more of the retailers throughout the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I noticed that we're clearly hitting all three of the points of the country here because Chad's up in Michigan and I'm North Louisiana. Grew up in East Texas, so we're hitting all of it. And
Where in North Louisiana are you?
in Shreveport,
Oh shoot, man! I got family in Shreveport. I got family in Bossier City, which is
seriously, that's
yeah,
insane.
yeah, right.
So I technically um, I won't go too detailed, but everybody on the show knows about where I live anyway at this point. So grew up in Gilmer, Texas, and then um, kind of floated over here my senior year. But after graduated, went to the Marines, got out, and landed here with a job. Had some family scattered over here too. And I spent 9, almost 10 years in Bossier, and just a couple years ago, just jumped to the other side of the river and been in Shreveport since. But that's that's kind of crazy that you got family here because most of the
Hmm.
time I'm talking about somebody that's not from here, and I just do a big geographical area,
Yep. Small world.
but there's not. Man, I struggle for, and the guys know this. I struggle for finding a solid cigar retailer. There's one here that's fantastic on pricing and storage, but
Right.
we don't really have a good lounge space. They just opened one a few months ago that I haven't been to yet, so I can't really speak on it. But the other, what's technically the biggest cigar retailer here, I honestly, without trying to trash them, I have no idea how they're in business because their storage is disgusting, and almost every cigar I've tried to get from there, it's either cracked or molded. But they have lounge space, so they get that.
Yeah.
So,
You drive
so
like an
I
hour and a half, don't you? To is it underground you go to?
Well, I go to Underground's in Forest. It's about 3.5 hours to me, but I'll drive the hour to Longview to go to Tobacco Junction because they
Tobacco
have
Junction.
fantastic lounge, great storage, great tobacconist. So I will gladly drive the hour to a lounge and bypass the stuff that's actually here in town. It's kind of sad, but it is what it is.
So you want to
Wow.
know? We were talking about PCA. I learned something the other day because I'm going for the first time, and in New Orleans, you're not going to be able to smoke inside the PCA show. No
Really?
smoking on the event floor, which I thought was just crazy. Like, why would you set an event up for cigars and not be able to smoke inside?
Where's it
So
act- Where's it actually being held at? Did you remember what? I didn't look what facility it's in.
I could look it up. I don't recall because I'm not familiar at all down there.
That's
My
fair.
ticket was sent to me, and I'm going. I
Oh,
haven't
it's
looked
it's in the
over
actual the main convention center. That's
there. Yeah,
interesting.
so the last time we went to that, I think it was like 8 years ago or something. Um, they were really strict with any smoking outside of the outside of the floor, the trade show floor, and they were
okay.
really strict on smoking outside of the hours of the trade show. But you could still smoke on the trade show floor. Um, just everywhere else was super restrictive. So if they didn't allow smoking in the trade show, I don't know how they would be able to run the trade show
That's
because
what I was
Boy,
thinking. It's all about smoking. How do you
it
run a
would
trade show about
it would
smoking?
be impossible. I mean, I hope that's certainly not the case, um, because that would be absolutely insane, and I don't know how anybody would conduct business. I mean, how many people are just walking around smoking, or you're talking with customers, everybody's smoking. It's like a big plume of of smoke that covers the entire trade show floor. So, boy, I hope that's not the case.
I'm hoping that everybody just revolts and everybody just lights up at the same time and kick us
It's
all
I'm
it's
out.
it's very expensive. So one of the things every year at the PCA that's always like a stickler is, there's like these booth setup times, right? So you have 2 or 3 or 4 days before the trade show where everybody comes in, you set up your booth, etc. And they are so militant about not smoking during those times. And it's always that I think the last one was like a $10,000 fine.
so
And so,
I just pulled this.
yeah,
I just pulled this up to see. Um, they have updated it. There's a long thing that they've just entered into a refreshed contract with the convention center. Blah blah blah. So it says smoking at the PCA trade show will only be allowed in the designated convention and meeting areas and only during trade show hours. So they did work it out inside during the show. There's a list of places that you cannot smoke, and that it is now a $15,000 fine for any
there you go.
attendees that break the rule.
Well, I'm happy that you can smoke in the building because as of last weekend
Yeah.
when we looked it up, you still
Yeah,
couldn't. They said
it's
they were going to be designated areas outside. They said.
yeah. It still says the entry hallway, foyer, exterior meeting rooms, guest rooms, of course the lobbies, but basically they're
Yeah.
allowing it to make sure that you're in the room. So they did open it up, sort of.
Thank God. That would have been a disaster for the PTA.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh!
That would have been a disaster,
No
to say
cigars
the least.
sold this year at PCA. Not one.
I you would have some very, very angry manufacturers and companies that are paying to
Well,
attend because
I will tell you bluntly, it wouldn't have surprised me because um, as a police officer myself, New Orleans and Louisiana does things a little weird. So everywhere in the country, you have your city police and you have your county police. Of course, Louisiana, we're French old school, so they're parishes still. But New Orleans, the city of New Orleans, like almost every law that you look at that doesn't matter what you're talking about that is statewide, then there's always this caveat. But in the parish of New Orleans, like they have their own codes, their own laws that are different than the entire rest of the state. And it makes a very vague reference on here due to the New Orleans law. So I guess just the city of New Orleans has some extra strict stuff they had to fight through. Which doesn't surprise me because New Orleans is its own world when it comes to any type of rules and regulations.
Yeah, that's of all the things that happened in New Orleans, I would think smoking would be their least of concerns.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
you would think.
1,000% true.
I mean, we have an entire city street that's an container allowance, but can't smoke.
Don't they have like a drive-through liquor, like an
Yeah.
open container drive-through liquor stand in New Orleans?
So it's actually they have it. It's spread to most of the state, and the irony is they have made an allowance, and this is very laughable. You have open container laws. You can't have open alcohol, right? But I can get a styrofoam container, put liquor, daiquiri, margarita, whatever in it, put a regular plastic lid that you'd put a straw through. But as long as when you drive away, there's a piece of scotch tape over the hole, it's
Yeah,
legal.
It's not an open container then?
The
it's
scotch tape,
close.
it's
That's
closed.
amazing.
So,
Close.
but
Does it?
what everybody do is as soon as you pull out of the drive-through, rip.
Nice.
So that's how they get
That
away with it.
was, yeah. I would have loved to be around the decision table with all the elected officials when they discussed the intricacies of that one.
Right. But hey,
Somebody
Yeah,
was like, "But what if we just put the scotch tape?" And they're like, "Well, technically, it is closed.
it is
Like,
closed.
technically, that works."
that's
That's
a
So
funny.
like, hey,
loophole.
it's like it's not the owner's fault. When I gave it to him, he couldn't drink it. Now what he did when he pulled off that scotch tape, I don't know. That's on him.
Hmm.
But
I like it. I
no,
like
they're funny down there. But
it.
yeah, it's I was actually trying to see if because being here, it's not too much of a drive for me to get to New Orleans. But unfortunately, that entire weekend of the show dates, I'm on shift. So I was trying to see if I could sneak down there and run into Chad outside the event, but doesn't look like I'm gonna be able to pull that secret off.
That'll be amazing.
That
What
would
time are you
be.
going to show up? You can
I,
do it, Pat. Come on.
shoot, by the time I get down there, I have to turn back around and make it to my next shift.
Right. So, Ian, I guess why don't I'd really like to hear a little bit about how you got started and like a little bit about your company. Like a lot
Yeah,
of
let's
people
do
out
it.
there don't know about Dapper, and give you the floor for
Yeah.
a minute to do that.
Yeah. I mean, my background is in IT and stuff, and so cigars were a hobby for me, and uh, probably about 15 years ago, I started getting interested more in the manufacturing of cigars and making cigars, and it kind of encouraged me to see if I could make my own cigars, and it took me a couple years, 2 or 3 years of going down to Nicaragua and trying to figure things out, and all the things you don't really think about a lot of the things when you're starting like something from scratch that you really don't know much about. Like as a consumer, okay, it's a rolled piece of tobacco and there's a band on it and it sits in a box and that sort of thing. And I guess when you get into it and you start trying to make your own cigars, there's a lot of things outside of even just a cigar that you don't really consider. And I certainly didn't consider a lot of those things. I probably should have thought about it a little bit more before I decided to do it. But maybe going in a little naive is good, right? It
Right.
keeps your
Yeah.
motivation going, right?
If you
And
knew better, you
so,
probably wouldn't do it, right?
oh hell no! If I knew about
Right.
all this shit, I'd be like, oh my god, I'm gonna pick up golf, bro.
Right.
Yeah, and so that kind of started, and um, it took me like I said, it took me 2 or 3 years of just kind of going down there and figuring out who to work with and who to make cigars with, and doing that sort of thing before I had a product. Our very first product was the Kubo line,
Mhm.
which we don't even sell that line anymore. It was a shade cigar. Yeah, the Connecticut shade. Actually, we
The
don't even
last
make.
one I had.
I don't even think I have any of those. People tell me all the time they love those, and um, it was just kind of a medium, real medium smooth cigar. And shoot, that thing's probably really old by now. It's probably 10 years old, so it's probably tastes very smooth, I would imagine. And after you kind of as you're like figuring out how to do it all, you just kind of go from one thing to the next. You're like, how do you make some bands, and who do I talk to about printing bands, and how do I make the cigars, and what do you do to blend cigars, and So just it took me a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, to just kind of piece a lot of that stuff together. And then, how do you squirrel away enough money to kind of make sure that you can pay for it all in that first round? And
Right.
yeah, I remember buying our first bands, and like we buy our bands from most of our bands come from a company called Vrijdag in the Netherlands, in Eindhoven, Netherlands, I think. And I remember doing a wire transfer to them for the amount of money, because they wouldn't even, as a new business, they don't even know who you are, so they're not going to like give you any terms, because
No
they've never
credit.
done any.
Yeah.
There's no credit. They're like, hey, you
Yeah.
send us the money, then we'll start. And I remember transferring the wired amount to them, and I was just going, oh my god, I was like freaking out. I'm like transferring like a car payment over these guys,
Right.
um, hoping that it just ends up on the other side, in one piece. Uh, and so that's kind of how it went. And we made our first cigars down in Nika in a very small factory compared to what we do today. And I think we probably made 5,000 cigars or so. Between the Maduro and the Connecticut, it was probably about 5,000 each. Might have been less, but three different sizes. We did a Robusto 5x50, a Toro 6x50, and a Gordo, which was not a 60, it was like 56, like a 6x56. And we did them in 25 count cabinet boxes. And yeah, I mean, I remember taking a week off of work and going, okay, I'm going to start selling cigars in Northern California. Um, and not really even knowing, you know, anything about how to even go out and sell the cigars, right? I mean, it's just like, okay, I figure I'm just going to walk into stores and go, hey, here's some cigars, and I had like an igloo cooler, the one you buy at Walmart, had it in
Yep.
the back, had it in the back trunk, um, and had some pricing sheets printed out. And the very first store I ever stopped at was in Merced. There's a guy named Mike, and he has a store called Cigar Monkey. Mike passed away semi recently, a couple of years ago, and his wife runs the store now, but Janet. But I walked into Mike, and I didn't know anything about Mike, and I didn't know he was legally blind. So that's kind of a that's a surprise, as I that's a whole funny story on its own. But Mike was just the like nicest guy on earth, and I walked in, and I told him the whole story, and uh, I gave him some cigars, and he was like, "Yeah, well, you want to sit down and smoke some cigar? Smoke a cigar with me?" I go, "Oh, that'd be great." We smoked the cigars, and he goes, "Yeah, do you have any on you? I'll buy them now." And I had just packed kind of enough cigars for like the whole week to give out as samples and things like that.
Right.
And I was like, yeah. I was like, oh, hold on. How many boxes do you want? I think he bought like 6 boxes, which was, a considerable amount of money, I thought. And yeah, I wrote him up and the whole deal and whatnot. And uh, I just kept thinking after I left that first appointment and after I made that sale, I was like, shit, this fucking business is easy,
It's
bro.
easy.
I was like, this is going to be a walk in the park. I'm going to be done by Thursday or whatever, Wednesday.
Right.
And then I proceeded to go on the road, visit like a ton of shops throughout Northern California. I didn't sell one freaking box more than that.
Oh
Like
wow.
everyone was failure, terrible. It was just a brutal week on the road. Brutal week on the road. And yeah, it was always kind of funny. It was just like, you start off thinking one thing, and then the next thing you know, you're like, oh, geez, this. And by the end of the week, I was like, this business sucks.
You get
Like, I
humbled
don't know
real
how
quick,
anybody
right?
makes any money in this business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get
And so
humbled.
that was pretty funny. It was, and it's been, it's a challenging thing. I mean, it's funny. The same things I went through that first week, um, you still go through day in and day out, and the business is a very difficult business. Um, but and I always, I see a lot of, um, the number one thing that you get at every cigar store, if you're a boutique, smaller brand, is, hey, how do I start my own cigars? And so I have to talk people off the ledge a lot.
Right.
I feel like I don't want to be the negative Nancy, but I also don't want like a lot of people's like hopes and dreams to be crushed,
Right.
and their checkbook to be crushed as well.
Mhm.
So I feel like the boat owner, right? You always hear from these boat owners. You go out in the boat and you're like, I think I want a boat, and it's the old story. They go, okay, well, give me $100 out of your wallet. They rip it in half and throw it over the side and go, if that bothers you even the slightest, do not own a boat. I feel like that guy for cigar companies. You know.
That's fair.
That's
I've
awesome.
thought about and I've talked to a couple of friends and new friends like about this. I was like, man, I've decided that if I were to ever do anything, it would be a like one maybe two time combined project with somebody because I'm not going down the hill of starting an entire line on my own. Like that's just because the more I've learned, it's a very intense thing to get going. It's a cool thing, it's a fun thing, but there's a whole lot like you're talking about all the logistics and stuff that you didn't realize you were going to have to put in. It's a big endeavor to
Yeah.
get. So
It is a big endeavor, and the part that I was really naive about, and that I didn't, and I still don't understand it 100%. I understand more than I did back then, but in hindsight, making the cigars are trivially or much more trivial. And I think what you see is most of the problems in the cigar when it comes to companies coming into the cigar business is the selling of cigars. That's the really, really difficult part. It's really, it's not like you're making a consumer product and you're going to like the buyers of Costco and you're like, hey, I just need to sell that guy and then we're going to get reach. In
right,
the cigar business, it's every single store you're kind of selling to is a small business, and those small businesses, they operate very differently than large businesses. They're oftentimes mom and pop stores. They're oftentimes very non-receptive towards bringing in new products. They all have their individual quirks, no matter who it is, and so and they're not dense, right? Like in Fresno alone, there's probably I don't know, there's probably 100 smoke shops, head shops, places you can go buy
Wow.
rolling papers and bongs and whatever other shit that, I don't
right,
know, uh,
Vapes,
urine
and
piss tests, you name it, counterfeit sweaters. I don't know. But there's probably a
right.
hundred of them here in Fresno. So there's probably more smoke shops and head shops in Fresno than there is premium cigar retailers in the entire northern part of California. We're talking about everywhere from Bakersfield all the way up to the Oregon border, which is a huge area. So the not being dense in the number of places that you can sell to being very low, and then them being very non-uniform makes it
Mm.
exceptionally difficult to reach and sell into. And that's the hardest part, I think, in the cigar business. I hate to say it. I mean, we all want to probably say that the hardest part is making a good cigar. There's a lot of great cigars, and the factories and everything are so good in a lot of areas that you can produce a good cigar, and you can produce that item relatively easy, and that's easier than getting it sold into retailers by far and away.
I mean, it makes sense though too, because from our perspective, you're talking about I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of cigars there are, and both me and Chad have been smoking for a very long time, and we are still finding out cigars that we think are new, and they're
Right,
not. They've been out five,
right,
10, 15 years, and we're
right,
like, oh, I've never even heard of this. So, from a
right.
consumer perspective, you've got the challenge of getting these cigars in places that are going to meet consumers. So I see how it can be challenging just from the other coin. We're
Yeah,
if I've got a cigar that's been there 15 years, and as
right,
much as I'm smoking, looking at samplers, going to events, getting all these
right.
drops, and never seen that cigar, that just explains that challenge that you have to get it out there in hands.
Super difficult. Super difficult. I mean, this is our 11th year in business, even though it's a 10th anniversary cigar. It's our 11th year in business. And we probably have less than less than 10 retailers in the state of Florida. And the state of Florida has, probably hundreds of retailers.
Right.
We've never had really good sales representation or any sales representation out in Florida. It's a exact polar opposite part of the country that we're at. And this is our 11th year in business. And a lot of people, come across our cigars and they'll be like, oh, this is the first time I've actually tried that cigar or whatnot. And, it just goes to show you how difficult it is to get reach in retailers. With the internet, it's better. Obviously, it's much easier. You can get to, if you can get your product into places like Small Batch Cigar or Atlantic Cigar or any of the web pages,
Right.
then that opens the door to get your cigar out to a lot of consumers. But um, as a company, we have very little knowledge of who the end consumers really are, right? If you walked into a store, uh, and you bought our cigar every week, and we never talked to you, we never knew who you were. We have no idea that some guy's walking in that store and buying that cigar every week because he likes that brand, unless they reach out to us somehow or subscribe to our page or whatever. Um, so it's tough. You're kind of flying a little bit blind in some sense. And you don't really see those things until you go out to a store and you do an event, and then some guys show up and go, "Oh man, I love your cigar. I smoke this one all the time." You're like, "Oh shit, where you been? Who
I
are
mean,
you?"
El,
I'm,
El
you know,
Baracho. That's me.
I'll call it like it is. I'm one of the guys that been smoking for almost 15 years now, and I learned about Dapper about a year and a half ago, thanks to this guy because of his connection with Ronnie up in Secreto, and they had the Dappler
Yeah,
or the sampler,
Yep,
and
that was my
he
introduction too. Was Ronnie?
he tried it and was like, holy shit. So he kept hitting some of us in our little group chat. He's like, y'all got to try this, got to try that. One of the guys tried it and started piggybacking it, like, okay, this is legit.
yeah,
And nobody around here, at least in the local area that I've found, sells them, scattered in East
yep,
Texas. So, I've gotten some from BL Luxuries, and I think Mardo was the two places I ordered them from to start kind of. And these I
hmm
actually got from Luxury because I was looking to get this specific one, and they were sold out. So I
yeah,
got it from Luxury, but I had to go online to find them. But if
yeah,
Chad hadn't run across that sampler at Secreto, I may still not know
yeah.
about it. So,
And credit to Ronnie. Look, Ronnie is what I would consider a top 1% retailer. And when I say that, here's what I mean. Um, there's a lot of retailers where you walk in, they got 1,000 brands on the shelf. Let's just say 500 brands on the shelf, and they're getting stuff in all the time. And where you put your boxes in the store and where they go, and you never know unless you've got reps that go into there all the time and they're checking and they're pumping and they're trying to make sure that you're relevant in the store. You really don't know. And so Ronnie is different. Ronnie, when he gets behind a brand for whatever reason, whether he likes the branding or the product or everything, and he's got his own mystical thing in his head, in his mind of why he chooses to support who, he really tries to help the brands. He really goes out there and tries to get that cigar into the hands of his customers and introduce them to it and push it. And so that's a really rare retailer. Very, very seldom does that happen in the world of cigar retail. And
right.
I mean, I may get a lot of flack for it, but I think it's true. I think you look at what Ronnie does. You look at, I mean,
There's
he
not many
he
Ronnies out there.
there's not, and I think that's partially too, in part, why he's so successful at what he does. I'm going to just go on a limb and say he's very successful at it. He has a very, very, um, he has a very, um, uh, I don't know, personable kind of touch to it. He really gets out. He knows his customers. He pushes the products. He's not trying to sell products that he doesn't know his customers won't want or whatnot, but he has a really good sense of that. So, when he came out to us, um, he actually asked for something we'd never done before, and we still hadn't done. He'd asked for a sampler in every cigar that we made in Corona Gorda. Now, mind you, we don't make some of the cigars in Corona Gorda. For instance, we don't make Barachos in Corona Gorda. We didn't make a lot of those. I think there was three cigars that we included in that sampler that we don't normally produce in Corona Gorda. But because it was Ronnie, and because also he put a lot of money down the line, we were like, we'll do it for you, man. We'll make you your own sampler,
Right.
and we'll make a couple cigars that we don't normally produce for people in that size that you want, and we'll include a cigar that's pre-released yet in there as well for you. And I'll be honest with you, I smoked some of those cigars out of that sampler. I actually had to buy one because I didn't even have any of the samplers. We just shipped them directly to him.
Yeah.
So I bought one from him, my own son. Like, I feel like a schmuck, but
That's
I
that's
bought
great.
one of those samplers and I smoked those Barachos in a Corona Gorda. I was like, holy shit! I don't know why we don't make the size of these. They're like amazing. Um,
I remember
uh,
Chad saying something similar when he got it. He was like, "Holy crap!" Because he likes that cigar, and I remember him raving
mhm.
about it as well. So yeah,
The El Borracho Broadleaf is by far my favorite. That's my jam.
That's awesome. I like that cigar in the Bellicosa. We don't sell a lot of the Bellicosa, but I love that cigar in the Bellicosa. But that Corona Gorda was amazing. And
It
we
is
don't
good.
make the Corona Gordas because we just can't sell them real well. Like, with us here talking on, these podcasts, or if I meet guys that are really into cigars, they'll smoke a Corona Gorda. But
hmm
everybody else wants a Toro or a Busto. They don't even want to deal with the Corona Gorda. So like trying to sell, like whenever you sell a Corona Gorda, you almost clap. You're like, oh yeah, hey, great, we sold one. But the mass market of retailers, they want a Toro, and then they'll want a Robusto, and then they'll maybe want something that's bigger, like a Gordo or something like that. But Corona Gorda is like for 90% of the purchases that we get, it's just not a size that people want to carry and stock on the shelf, and it's a kind of a unique cigar geeky kind of size.
I
At
love
least
that. I
that's been
love
my
that
experience.
size for
like the
sure. I love that
Lanceros, you
size.
gotta personally just want that size to really
Yeah.
push it. Not everybody does.
And Lanceros sell the worst. They're
hmm
like the number one wanted cigar that sells the worst. And
Right.
I mean, it's just like I get that all the time. I get that all the time. People are like, "Hey, when are you going to make a Lancero on this?" I'm like, "When you buy 5,000 of them, that's when I'll make them."
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So back to that set, Ian. There was an unreleased cigar in there, and I think you and I had talked about it just on Messenger at one point. But
Hmm.
when I talked to you about it, it was going to be released later in the year. You thought, is that released now?
No, so there's a couple in that set.
Was there a
We
hang
had
up with it?
Yeah, in that
The
set we had the
Crudo.
El Borracho Crudo, yeah, and that is going to be released, but it kind of collided with this 10th anniversary project, and we
Mm.
wanted to get the 10th anniversary out. We kind of wanted to stagger it. So
Okay.
this everything is about 6 months late in typical cigar fashion.
Right.
So we just received our 10th anniversary on our 11th anniversary. There you go.
Working on
Um,
Nicaraguan time.
we are like on year light savings time or whatever. Yeah, it's going to come out. It's a different version of our El Borracho. Um, the original El Borracho, specifically the San Andreas. I was smoking a lot of Padron 26 uh, back when I originally blended that, and I thought, it'd be nice not to spend all this money on this Padron 64. Sorry, 64. It'd be nice not to spend all this money on these 64s, and I just make my own San Andreas version, kind of a 64. And so we made that, and then I kind of got into broadleaf a bit, and I was like, it'd be really nice to have a broadleaf box press instead of San Andreas. So then I switched to that, and then I found myself buying a lot of 26 Padron 26s. Like, your palate changes, and I don't know, there's just something about that cigar that I really like. So I was like, well, we got to come out with a Baracha that's kind of mimics a 26 a little bit, or at least satisfies whatever it is about that cigar. Maybe
Mm.
it's a little bit more punchy. Maybe it's a little bit more Nicaraguan in taste. So that's what the Crudo is going to kind of hopefully
Okay,
satisfy on
that
my
makes
end.
sense then. That makes sense because
Does make
it does have a little more bite, and I do like
Hmm.
that about it too,
Hmm.
for sure. That is a
Hmm.
great cigar. I've got one of those sets left, and I've still got it stashed. I've been trying to keep myself from opening it up, but it'll get busted open soon,
Oh yeah.
no doubt. But back
Yeah.
to what you were saying about Ronnie is so true. Like once he champions a brand, there's no stopping him. Like he
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
decides if he gets behind it, and he'll only get behind it if he really believes in it. That's the thing I know about him. He doesn't
Yeah.
push shit that he won't smoke. He doesn't push shit that he doesn't smoke and that he doesn't
Yeah.
like. Like he's not. Some of these guys just sell stuff to sell stuff. He will not do that. If he doesn't believe in your product and you as a person, he's never going to push your brand.
And if you know,
That's
and
the thing I
because of
like
that,
about him.
if you know he's pushing it, you know it's gonna be a rock solid product, or at least he believes it's rock solid because he's putting
Yeah.
every effort. He's sitting it on social media. He does his lives. He does his random personal lives and such, dropping stuff to just get people to try it, and then does all these different bundles and swag, like entices people. It's very hard not to go buy stuff he sells because it's like, here I'm
Yeah.
giving stuff to make you try this because I like it so much. I want you to smoke
Yeah.
it, and you
He
get
only
that.
Yeah.
carries so many brands, and there's a small, maybe less than two hands full. He doesn't. He's not like some of these shops that have 40 different SKUs or brands. You
hmm
know, he might
hmm
have. He has 10 or less, and he pushes them hard.
He does.
So, and that's the
Yeah.
thing that
But
you struggle with, I'm sure, Ian, is you're really ultimately you're fighting for shelf space in
yeah.
these brick and mortars. You know.
Yeah. And as a smaller brand too, we're not only fighting for shelf space, but we're really fighting for we're trying to figure out, even to this day, what is our 20% retailers? What are our retailers that are like the Ronnies, or nobody's like Ronnie, but have Ronnie like characteristics? Who are the retailers that like your brand for whatever reasons and want to get behind and support you and want to keep turning that? And it's tough, the cigar business has become very it's become very price competitive on the manufacturing side, and you have really large entities that you're battling against, and those large entities have they have the capacity to heavily incentivize the retailers to carry their products. And as a retailer, I get it. If I was a cigar retailer, I would be swayed by a lot of that because
Yeah.
it means more money in your pocket at the end of the
You
day.
mean the big guys like General
The
and
big guys,
Altadas and
General, Altadis, Oliva,
yeah,
AJ, all of the big guys. My father's huge. A lot of these brands are
right.
these are monstrous entities now that
Do you
have
know how many of
tremendous
those?
pull.
You know how many of those brands Ronnie carries?
I don't know, probably very little, I would imagine, right? Maybe
Zero.
Padron he probably carries a
Padron, he
lot.
does. Yeah, Padron. And that's just been recently, and that's only because of his new partner. But
Maybe
yeah, he doesn't.
Fuente. Does he do Fuente at all?
Yeah, he's huge into Puente now.
Huge on
Okay.
Fuente.
Okay. So Fuente's a big one. Yeah, I mean, I think as a smart retailer, you have to carry some of that. I mean, if I was a retailer, excuse me, I'd try to have everything.
Hmm.
And the stuff that, especially everything that the people would come in and walk in and request and buy. Now, personally, I probably wouldn't go over the top. Like, if a guy wants a Macanudo, yeah, I'd have a Macanudo. But I don't know if I'd have 14 facings of Macanudo. Like, to me, that seems ridiculous. To me, it would only seem like, okay, well, the ones that people want to request and come in and buy, okay, I'm going to have them because I don't want them to leave my store empty-handed per se. But believe me, like if if it was a Macanudo buyer, I would certainly try to put them onto a product that I think is better. I would even
Right.
maybe even give them a product that I think fits in their wheelhouse, that I think is a better product and that supports the company that I want to support. And that's what I would do for myself if I was in a retail spot, because I feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Not to convince them that they shouldn't buy the Macanudo, but if I think there's better products that they would enjoy that's in the same price range, I try to get them onto it, or at least give them a shot. And I think that little bit of philosophy is hard because you can't control that in the retailers, and there's so many
Yeah.
brands. And so getting back to the difficulties of getting shelf space, the difficulties of finding the retailers that are going to help and support your brand, that's like the 80% challenge in the cigar business, and it's
Yeah.
always changing.
And it's a good
you know
point because
Right.
if like you're talking about just drastic difference between California and Florida, the different markets, different desires, knowing just what cigars go there. Because if you're just talking about two brands alone and you got limited retail space, you could fill your entire store with Rocky and AJ alone because they've got so many SKUs. So you can't really do that.
Correct.
You can't source and sell everything. So you kind of have to know the different market lines and what's potentially going to be
Yeah.
good for this market versus that market. And
Mhm.
that's a whole game in itself.
Yeah,
Where
it's a brutal gig.
So
are you currently rolling it? Is it Noxa? Is that where you're having
Yeah,
all
the
of your cigars made?
predomination of our production is made at Noxa, and that's owned in part by Oliva Tobacco Company. And Oliva Tobacco
Noxa's
is
a
not
great
Oliva
factory.
Cigar.
Right, right.
right.
So it's yeah, I mean they're uh the predomination of their business is growing leaf, growing wrapper leaf. And they're the big non-shade wrapper growers in Ecuador. So they have very large they have a large portion of the market for anybody that uses an Ecuadorian wrapper that's not a Connecticut shade. That's the other entity, which is ASP, or the Perez family that does the shade grown stuff. But anything Sumatra, Cuban seed, etc., out of Ecuador is almost certainly grown by Oliva, uh, or majority of it is. So they also have a large sorting facility in Esteli, and they own they own in partnership with a few other entities the Noxa factory. And so a lot of folks, myself, Saka, etc., a lot of folks make their cigars with Noxa.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I knew that Saka has several cigars, not all, but I would
Mhm.
say probably half of his SKUs are rolled there. But who are some others that use Noxa as a factory?
A lot of folks, Aroa, Patina, Malilo makes some cigars there. There's probably a few others that I'm. Crowned Heads now is starting to make cigars there.
Okay.
Warped is now starting to make some of their
Yeah, and
cigars
that was
there.
it was Kyle Gallus. I thought that too. I was thinking
Yeah,
that was correct. Yep.
yeah. So there's a lot of entities now that are making cigars there. I think when I started there years ago, it was basically Aroa, Saka, myself, and then maybe some other brands that they were making for larger entities.
So I got a random question. This popped in my head earlier, and then as I like to do, I got squirreled. So your Kubo Claire, like I mentioned this because it's the last one I have. So I pulled it out a few times and then I put it back. I know there's a few. I know
Just
there's a
smoke it.
well. I
Okay.
know there's a few that are still floating around, but when did you actually stop producing this? Because I was trying to figure out when you actually stopped, and I haven't been able to define that. I'm just personally curious on that.
I don't actually know.
Remember?
I would have to look back and give you the exact year to see when the last production runs were, but it's quite a long time. It
Because
has to be more than 8 years ago.
because
Wow.
I thought it had been a while, and the reason I was curious is because I'm pretty sure I could be wrong. I have to go back in my spreadsheet and look, but I thought I got this one on one of the blind buy things that BL Luxuries do, but I know like on Mardo, if you go look at it now, it says it's aged 2 years, and I'm like, I get that, but I'm pretty sure that this is
Uh,
way back.
they may
So
have copied and pasted something from
and just
back in the
left
day and
it
left
alone.
it, but I can guarantee you if you're smoking that cigar, it's at least 8 years old. At
You have
least.
another Cubo though, right? The one with the like purpley pink background on the same
Yeah, so the
band.
the only one that we make, so we made a Cubo Claro and we made a Cubo Maduro, which is the San Andreas Maduro. Those are the ones we discontinued. We make a Kubo Sumatra still today.
Sumatra. Yep.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
and that's still in production. That cigar is made at Noxa, and that is still a production cigar for us. But
It's a good
in
one too.
terms of those old Claros and the old Claro, the old Maduro, that I mean, the roll date on that has to be 8 years ago, if not longer, depending on what size you got.
Like
You know,
I'm kind of nerdy to a point. Like I pulled this one out, and I did it again today. I pulled it out, and then I set it down and said, "Nope, I'm gonna go get one of the Rosados because I just don't want to smoke it yet." And once I'm proud if I get my hands on some more, okay, then I'll smoke one. It's that thing of not wanting to smoke the last one I
I-
have.
I'll be honest, like Robusto's Toros, I haven't seen a box of those. It's been a while.
No, like I checked right before the show started just to see if there's any out there. And Marto's got like a few singles, but they don't have any packs or boxes left. So they're just, I know they're getting sparse. It's just
See, we're
whatever's
talking
left.
about
Yeah.
sales, Pat, and I feel like you're missing a huge sales opportunity here because you could
What's
probably
that?
sell this back to Ian for at least $100,
Yeah.
Right?
right? I
Well,
mean, they're non-existent.
I will say
Right?
this. I know of one box that's perfect and from the original run, and my buddy bought it at my very first event, and he kept it for me. And so he
Mm,
keeps reminding me of it every once in a while. And I'm just like, nah, 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 just keep it. I don't want to go down that path. But
Not ready
so I
for
do
it.
know, yeah, I do know of one untouched box that's still in cellar that's in my buddy's humidor that he saved for me. But
nice.
we may have some like of the funky sizes left. I don't know. Like maybe like we used to make these little petite Coronas and 15 count boxes and stuff. We might have a couple of those. I'll have to dig in and see if I can find them. I whenever I find like old stuff like that, what I usually end up doing is I usually end up giving it to somebody that likes it.
Okay.
If I I'll give you an example. Like um, I was speaking with the guy that runs that Coned blog. Um, I think it's John Coned or whatever. He's been running this blog for like 15 years. He's like he's a great writer. He his like when you read his blog posts, they're just like, it's like, dude, you missed your call in life, man. You could have been like a literary person or something. And maybe he is. Uh, but he had written a really nice review of our La Madrina shade, and he gave it 100 points, which I stuck out. And I didn't even read it. Somebody sent it to me, and I was shocked. And it
That's
was the La Madrina shade in Corona Gorda. And so I was going through the humidor the other day, and I actually came across a box of La Madrina shade Corona Gorda that was from the original run when we didn't even have the packaging on it, and we just used the regular La Madrina packaging, and we put a shade label on it, and we took those off the market and didn't sell them because people were getting confused because the packaging was identical,
right.
and all it did was indicate the variant with the shade. Even though one is a Habano wrapper and one is a Connecticut shade wrapper, people were still getting confused. Okay, which I understand. Um, and so I found that box and I shipped it to him. I just said, hey, I think you'd like this more than I would. Uh, just because of he rated it so high, and I thought that would be kind of cool for him to enjoy that. He would get a lot more enjoyment out of it.
That's a cool point. Give it because some people hoard them, but you keep them, for people that have enjoyment, which is the name of the game. But
100%, 100%. It would mean more for him than it would for me. For me, I just like widgets, right? I mean, some of them
right,
I get sentimental about, but I always joke because people always think that I'm like hoarding like massive amounts of cigars for me, and I'm like, I would sell them all if I could.
right.
you
Yeah,
know, the,
that's your goal, right? Get rid of them.
yeah, I have no sentimental attachment. I mean, even the factory called me up on these 10th anniversaries saying, "Oh man, we really screwed up." I was like, "What do you mean you screwed up?" He's like, "We forgot to mark the box that was box number one for you." And I was like, I don't care. Like, I hope somebody else gets it, you know?
Just send me a box.
Yeah, yeah. I don't care.
I mean, I've
So you
got a
ended
few.
up with $6.99, right, or whatever you got there.
I end up with. Yeah, it's kind of
670 something.
675.
There you
I end
go.
up with 675, which is funny because uh we did these little stickers, limited edition stickers. I'll have to see if I can put this on the camera. I don't know if you can see that. So there's a little limited edition
Yeah, you
sticker,
see it.
and there's a blank spot because the printers can't increment the numbers for us. So they couldn't increment 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., and have it all printed.
Okay.
And so we had to leave a blank spot. And um, that blank spot is where the packager will write the number, and hopefully they count correctly all the way to 1,000 and whatnot. Um, and so I had no idea that it would turn into the shit show it absolutely is to get somebody to write with nice handwriting the number. And there's actually a category of profession called a pendulist, and
Oh,
and you have to hire a pendulist to write it. And the pendulist gets paid more than anybody in like doing anything down there. Like the prices were insane, and I would get these like I would get these samples of them writing the numbers, and I'd have to pick like the style and the person and this. And I was
Wow.
like, this is the most absurd shit. I was like, can you just find a lady in the factory that writes pretty well and like
right.
give her a marker and just make sure she doesn't repeat the numbers and we're good? Like I'll
Right.
pay her extra that day. No, 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 no. I had to hire a pendulist. Yeah.
That's
Interesting. That's one
see,
thing I
that's the
didn't
kind of
know.
stuff you have no idea about, like until
I
you
had no idea.
hear these stories.
Yeah. $1 of every box is going to this fucking pendulist. I think he's making more money than anybody in in the supply chain. The pendulist one.
The list.
Oh,
So
we should.
Well, yeah. I mean, she's got to write 1,000 numbers. And I would go back and ask him, I would go, okay, well, how long is it going to take her for writing 1,000 numbers on stickers? Oh, 7 days. And
Seven days.
I'm like, 7 days. So I would literally, I would get like a piece of paper. I would write 0 to 100 and I would time myself. And I'd go back and go, hey, man, 7 days seems a little crazy because I wrote as nice as I could. And I wrote 100 numbers down and it only took me 30 minutes or whatever it was, right?
right.
So it's like, how do you get 7 days out of it? Yeah, you're right. Let's go check with some other ones. And all of them, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like every single one of them would give I mean, the shortest one we got was like 3 days, but it was still expensive as hell. I was like,
Wow.
this person is making more money.
Just writing numbers.
Uh, just right. And, you know, they write these kind of things are written on all sorts of things out, limited liquor,
Yep.
cigar. I mean, geez, gal's probably driving around a Bentley down there, you know?
So that the people that took the time to learn calligraphy that was going to be outsourced, here's a market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
You pay to
A
crazy.
write.
hundred percent. 100%. A
Wow.
100%. Yeah. There you go.
Interesting the things you learn. I never would have thought that there was a complete. I mean, I've seen those numbers on editions, like you said, even on liquor bottles. I mean, I just figured it was somebody in the packaging that had good handwriting. I would have never thought
Right.
there's a whole position and a title just for that.
It's a category. And in
That
the
is
yeah, yeah. In that country, it's called Pendlist.
Pendalists.
Did you have
Wow.
Go
any
figure.
trouble? Did you have any trouble during COVID getting boxes? Because I heard that there was like some issues with all of
Yeah,
that during the COVID time, and
I mean, there was a lot of issues during COVID with transportation and materials and everything. In the
Mhm.
beginning, it was really bad. Shipping was really bad too, like shipping in the US and shipping from, uh, in our case, Nicaragua. So there was lots of delays on everything. Everything was more expensive. And it wasn't just COVID, because at the same time that COVID was kind of happening, the Nicaraguan government was going through their whole ordeal. And
Remember that?
so that was like, they basically, I don't remember the exact specifics of the issue, but people were basically revolting because the government decided to maybe cut people's social security, right? Or like there was like, and we're talking like minuscule amounts for us. We're talking like dollars for us, and for them, it's like it was a huge ordeal because
Right.
they had promised to pay these folks, and they kind of, and I'm guessing I don't know the whole political dynamics. So if there's any Nicaraguan people out there that say I'm bastardizing the issue, my bad. I don't have a horse in the race on this one, but. There was huge government upheavals. They were closing down the main Pan American Highway. They were burning tires on the highway. That was causing a lot of transportation issues. Um, on the US side, I remember there were also all kinds of weird weather things. Like I remember everything kind of has to make its way from Miami, Florida to us here via trucking. I remember um, there being like blizzards and in Dallas. So it was like everything was running against you during COVID to get your cigars. Basically, everything bad that could happen was kind of happening. Uh, but with all that said, COVID was wonderful for us because people had a lot of money. and they spent a lot of money on cigars. They had a
There
lot of
was a cigar
time.
boom. There was a cigar boom during
Yeah,
Oh,
COVID,
for sure.
for
you
sure.
didn't have to go to trade shows. No sales reps had to go anywhere. No events. It was, I would say that COVID, if you were to really ask people, like a lot of the manufacturers probably did well. A lot of the retailers probably did well. And if they didn't, I'd be curious about that. But for most everyone, COVID was a good, it was a good financial thing for the cigar businesses. The following year, the following 2 years, obviously, there was a drop. And that's no, I think that's noticeable. Like the number of people spending the amount of money on things for cigars and stuff is significantly less than it was during COVID.
But it's kind of interesting that you mentioned the Nicaraguan thing because on New Year's we pulled in Greg Free from Fortaleza Libre
Mhm.
and ran into him at NFG in 2024, and he mentioned in our conversation that he originally planned, his company's about 5 maybe 6 years old at this point. He originally planned to be a Nicaraguan company. He flipped to Dominican because of all of that turmoil that was happening in
Mhm.
Nicaragua while he was trying to start.
You're
um,
right.
it was insane to kind of, and I don't know everything either, but it was interesting to see how that affected our products so strongly in cigar world.
Yeah, and there, it was also the other thing that people don't remember is the FDA rulings. So
Mm,
when the FDA stuff came out, that crushed a lot of the small brands that came out, and so a lot of folks just dropped out. And you used to see a ton of small companies um, at the trade show. And then I remember that first year during COVID or right after COVID, the number of small companies was very low. Um, I think, people were smart and just realized, hey, why would I start a cigar business if I know just by default I can't legally operate it if this FDA stuff goes through?
right,
And so that was a really bad time too. And you're starting to see a lot of new companies come out again um, because of the FDA stuff going away. And
right,
so I don't think I've ever seen it so many new companies. Like everybody's got a freaking cigar now, which good or bad, whatever. But it's like there's got to be 30 new cigar brands that have come out in the last couple of years. Um, and so the FDA combined with COVID, combined with the Nicaraguan stuff, that was a rough patch of time to go through. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you were already established at that point, but can you imagine being a brand new company? You know, one
Well,
year
for
old or
for
something.
us, it was bad. It was bad because we were restricted to release any new products, and we had to work within the confines of what we could hopefully get um, as a predicated blend.
mm,
So we were which historically is why we also have some weird sizes. Why is our Toro 6 1/8 by 52? Or, we had some weird size restrictions back then because we had to use, the thought is that we would have to use a predicated brand that existed before 2007 with proof and that was registered with the government, and we wasted thousands upon thousands of dollars on attorney fees that turned out to be all bullshit.
right,
And
That's crazy. I didn't know. Okay. Well,
oh
Pat and I
yeah,
talk about why sometimes we run into cigars that are odd size. We've discussed this several times. It's not
several
really a
times.
Toro. It's kind of a Toro. It's a 6.5 inch long Toro.
yeah,
But is that why,
yeah.
Ian? Is that because you think a
Well,
lot of
I don't
can,
know about other brands, but for us, the stuff that we had released at the time, like it was based on two things. It was firstly based on, could the factory that we were making the cigars out of prove that was a predicated brand, and are they filing the paperwork with the FDA for the predicated brand? Because if they get that predication, then we can basically file kind of like a cheating kind of, hey, this is the
pig,
same cigar, just a different label.
piggyback? Yeah,
Mm,
Piggyback,
piggyback.
right? That was the hope, right? So that's why for us, you saw cigar sizes that were odd, right? That were like 6 1/8 by 50, 52, like, we had just odd sizes at that time. And then the second thing that that's based on is the molds at the factory. So whatever cigar you're making at the factory is generally limited. If they don't have the molds, they have to make the molds, and the molds are quite expensive. And what I'm and the reason they're expensive is because in the old days, a lot of small factories would use wooden molds, right? They would go to these carpentry places down there, wood shops, and the wood shop would specialize in making these molds. I need a mold for a 5x50. Well, you can't just buy one mold that's got 20 cigars or 10 cigars. You got to buy hundreds of them, right? Because
Right.
you got to have enough molds every day to mold and press all the cigars that you're making every day. And if an average roller, let's just say a roller was rolling 250 cigars a day, well, you need how many molds? You need a lot of molds.
25, right? Yeah.
You need a lot of molds, right? And so the molds then started converting 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or whenever, to a injection molded plastic mold. Okay, and the reason that they did that was because those molds are more durable. They don't chip, they don't get beat up, they don't get damaged. Because when the molds get damaged, you can't use them. They don't. The cigar's not perfect. It's got a chip in it, so it kind of messes up the wrapper. It's not a perfectly uniform cigar. So when those wooden molds go bad, you didn't have that problem with the plastic molds. You can use them over and over and over again, and they won't chip and they won't damage. And so those molds are obviously more expensive and they take longer to get. And so you're really limited by the size of the molds. And there is some play, like for instance, if you have a mold that's like say a 6.5x52 mold, if you want to make a 6-inch cigar, you can make the cigar a little longer and just chop it off at the end at 6.
Right.
That's possible to do. So it's not like the length is a determining factor, unless you're doing some kind of crazy figurado or some sort of unique shape that you absolutely need the mold to look like that. But yeah.
Well, that's a talk about a learning point for the day, man. That explains several of our previous conversations that I had
Mhm.
not. Man,
Very interesting, for sure.
well,
Yeah, I mean, for us, that's why a lot of our sizes during that time were restricted. They had funky sizes because a lot of those funky sizes existed before 2007.
makes
And
sense.
that's why you also didn't see a lot of big gauges. So
Mhm.
everybody was kind of curious what would happen with the companies that were filing for predication for cigars over 60 gauge. Because if you think about cigars before 2007 or whatever the cutoff date was, there was not a lot of 60 gauge cigars back then or higher.
Right.
You know.
Pat's
Well, Ian,
favorite size.
I know, and I won't. This is kind of a thing. I've just got, and I mentioned this. I've just got big bear paws. So, as much as I like and respect the Toros, I smoke a lot of Toros. My preferred size is like a traditional Gordo for no other reason than how it fits in this big ass hand. So, like if I'm smoking a Robusto, and for the same token, the reason I don't smoke many Coronas is because my hand just starts cramping. It's no other reason.
Yeah.
And I know there's some flavor changes and some blending and smoothness and all that you can get into that gambit, but that's where it started for me, was just the comfort of me holding it for an hour.
You
But
got big mitts, man.
big mitts. But
He's a big boy.
well,
It's funny you said that because I one of the trade shows I ran into, I was at Intertabac, which is the world trade show for cigars. So PCA is kind of the US trade show for cigars, even
right,
though people from around the world come to it. But the Intertabac trade show is traditionally the show that all the Europeans and Africans and Asians and everywhere out non-US would go to. And it's in Dortmund, Germany. So I went there a couple years in a row, and I ran into a guy that he was distributing cigars to African countries, and and he was out of Belgium, and so they basically would route the cigars through Belgium and then distribute them down into these African countries. And I can't remember if it was like Nigeria or something. I can't remember which country it was, but he was like, "Look, I mean, he's like, I need cigars that are greater than 60. Matter of fact, 70 even better." Um, And I was like, well, we don't make any cigars that big. And
Right.
he's like, I cannot sell small gauge cigars in the African countries. I was like, well, why not? He goes, all my customers' hands are enormous and they don't like cigars that look, like they're tying like a cigarette in their
Right.
hand. Like they
Right.
want
That's
something
hilarious.
substantial. It's like a status thing. And
Yeah.
and their hands are like ginormous and stuff. And I was like, good point. I get that. Okay.
Big boy, big cigar.
Yep. Well, Ian, this is the part of the show we routinely say that we hate the absolute worst because by the time we have to wrap up for the day. But I'll tell you, brother, this is I'm glad we reached out and got you on, and this is hopefully not the last time. We'll definitely bring you on periodically because this has been some damn good conversation, and I'm not upset about it, but there was a couple things that we had on the back burner to ask you if we got to a stall point. We did not. Don't have that problem. We rarely have a problem running our mouths anyway.
Yep.
So,
Well, we'll save them for the next show.
yeah, save for the next show. But appreciate you coming on because we'll get you some info with you on those other cigars that are coming out. We'll definitely do. Me and Chad will definitely do a review on that one when it comes out because both
Awesome.
of us, as we have learned more about Dapper, we definitely are enjoying, as far as I'm aware, everything that we've touched so far. So, and we've said that with you not on the air just to be coy about it. That's not because you're sitting here. So we try to be honest. We even when we do review stuff, we are more home style. Like, okay, this is what they're expecting. This is what we actually think, agree or not agree. So, try to be more, middle class homeboy, just honest about it. So. But appreciate you coming out because this has been a damn good conversation, I think. So we'll have to do it again for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
no,
you, Ian.
yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate you guys getting me on here, and as a small cigar company, I appreciate you guys giving us a shot. There's a lot of cigars out there, and we kind of just hope that one will resonate with the customer. We don't have any demands of or expectations that every cigar we make. I mean, I don't smoke every cigar we make all the time. I tend to smoke, two or three of them that I really kind of lean on, and so our expectations are that hopefully somebody will try one of the cigars and they'll like one of our cigars. And I appreciate you guys taking the time, and appreciate the patronage, and love to get some new stuff out to you guys, and keep you posted on our press releases. And
Absolutely.
when you have any more time in the future, happy to hop on, happy to talk to you guys, and yeah, appreciate everything.
Well, we'll keep it
We
rolling.
appreciate it, man.
Another good day. And everybody out there, Hollow Down World watching, thanks for hanging out with us. Y'all know the drill. Stay safe and hollow down.